I'm Jules Ostara. Welcome to my studio here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Thank you for spending a bit of time with me in this way. I'm going to be using these papers that were created in a prior video. They were done with a brayer, so if you want to watch that video as well. And then I'm using these treasures that were gathered from a walk in the woods and around my home. They were gathered in winter, so even regardless of the season, you can find something. Then I had some invisible gloves lotion to protect my hands, and a jar lid to put the ink in, and some more items from nature that I might use as mark makers. So we're going to be doing ink painting in this video, and sometimes that can be a little overwhelming if you were to check out a book from the library on it and see all these tools and supplies that are recommended, but all you really need is one bottle of ink and some paper. You can have a brush. I'm going to use a brush at the beginning of this one, but in the second painting I'm using mostly other items found in nature to make the marks, if you stick around for that. Inspired to start with some sprinkles by that piece of the botanical that was on the left that I pointed to there to bring out those like little dried blooms. Now bringing in some of that curly grass, whatever that was that I had collected, with some fun loose squiggly lines. So letting the natural items that I found inspire the line work without worrying about representing it exactly as it is. So there I'm referencing that curvy shape on the bottom left of the board that I had put all those items that I collected on a piece of wood panel and arranged them, and even doing that before sitting down can get you in the flow and present in the moment to enjoy the process. Now looking at that little pine cone to bring these marks in, so varying it up, having some that are longer flowy lines, some that are little lines and dots, varying the amount of pressure, so some lines are thicker and others are very thin and delicate. Now letting some of those lines that were already on the paper from a prior painting session kind of lead the way for these marks to become incorporated. So again, you can watch the brayer video about creating all of those marks were made with a brayer on the pieces of paper that I'm now coming back into to add the second layer with. And this is on rice paper, this particular piece. You can see the supply list down below in the description for the video. And I decided I wanted to bring those marks up, make more of those dots, and in different sizes, some big, some little, so that the left-hand side was not being the same size as the dots on the right-hand side. So compositionally, making that a little different, because I prefer it that way. Trust your own intuition, your own taste, your own preferences while you're creating and organizing, rearranging. You're composing like a musician, but visually. And trust your own hand, your own touch. If you're a little wobbly or a little bit shaky, that's okay. That's part of your presence, your energy. And I quite love the squiggly scribbles and stuff. I was inspired by the marks on that stick on the right-hand side of the wood panel, because some creature, I imagine, had made those marks under the bark, and I was inspired by those. I love those. When you pick up, find a stick that looks like there's been an artist at work already from nature. So this can be a time of reverence and wonder and awe, appreciating all the little strange beauty that surrounds us in nature and in the world, and it could be man-made as well. I've done similar videos using random things from a junk drawer, so whatever you have available. And I love how this one turned out, and because it's on rice paper, you can see through it. You can flip it over, and it made a painting on both sides. Now moving on to do another one. This one is on watercolor paper, so it's thicker and quite different, and I'm using all of these natural items to make marks instead of a brush to start this one. And if you're enjoying this, please give it a thumbs up. You might also like to join me for the Inktastic Art Adventures. I use all different kinds of ink and papers in that one. There's a link to learn more about that in the description for the video. Okay, so starting work on this one. I love that it's not a blank page. I love a blank page as well. I love it both. Either way, it can be fun to start with a piece that already has something there, and I let the lines that were already on this piece show me where to start. So there was a place that I felt like I could make these little dried petals that I'm inspired by from the nature stuff over on the left, and where it would fit nicely with the marks that were already on the paper from that earlier layer that I had created in that other video. And the item I was using to make those marks is from a dried daylily stem. I like to collect a few at the end of each summer when they're dried out on the plant and standing there to use this way. And they're a little bit hollow, so you can get some interesting marks with them. And I did cut it at an angle before I started to use it, kind of similar to how you might make a quill with a feather. I do use a feather later, although I don't think it was one that I had actually shaped the end. But you can shape the end a little bit with your items if you want to. So I did that with this particular stem that I'm using here that has dried in so that it's rigid enough to hold its shape to use this way. Adding a little twist to that leaf there. So I find it helps to have a reference material, especially for that kind of thing when you want to show the way that a leaf twists around or curls around to see different sides, because it's easier while referencing it to see what direction, how to contour the lines. And again, not worrying about the representation being accurate or precise. This is easy ink painting, enjoying the process, exploring the possibilities, noticing, honoring, and celebrating the beauty both within and all around me, which is part of the focused and the approach for the Art as an Altar course that I offer. So you can also see a link for that in the description. It's one of my older offerings and one that I have noticed has continued to show up and inspire and infuse my work over the years since then. It's also been one of my most popular offerings that people have really enjoyed. Now adding these marks, it's almost like little drum beats or little heartbeats. So the rhythm, even the way whether we're tapping or whether we're flowing, having something flow more across the page like this, that all impacts the energy, that the vibe that it gives off. At least I notice it in the paintings. And in the process, while I'm creating it, it's giving something back to me. It's keeping me, there's something vital within it to keep it moving and not focus too much on perfectionism. You know, the intent, the way that we greet the canvas and the page and the process, all of that I think can be felt both obviously while you're making it, but also later. So I have noticed that I'm drawn to ones that feel more liberating and free, and I think that's part of the energy that's put into making the marks at the time. Now this is a stick that I found on the trail that was already kind of splitting apart at the end, and I thought it kind of looked like a brush, but it's harder. You know, it's not these flexible bristles. It's very hard because it's little pieces of bark or stick, and it made some really interesting marks that I quite love. And using all of these natural items changes the sensual aspect of the process. Now using this feather, so it's going to have, you know, if you think about maybe being ticklish with a feather or being light and lighthearted, uplifting. And I find that really helps me be even more present in the process while also getting out of my head, not overthinking what it looks like, not over emphasizing the visual, even though this is a visual artwork. It is also energy art. And for me, it's often playtime. It can also be therapy time, depending on what it is. You know, if I'm really feeling down, sometimes greeting the canvas, taking time, making the effort to look at these little details in the world that, to remember how abundant and plentiful this world is can be healthy, or just having fun and letting myself play, especially as an adult, coming back and creating a space and time in our lives to make room to play and make a marvelous mess. So the more you do this, the less you worry about making a masterpiece. You can have plenty of be free to fail, be free to make a wild mess, and enjoy the process in doing so, especially if you're using inexpensive materials and supplies like this. So that's another thing I love about this one. I love color, and I am going to do one with color at the very end of this, adding some color, but simplifying it to just having a piece of paper and a single color of ink and some mark making tools can make it less intimidating and less expensive and less pressure, so that we can really be free and explore and experiment. So here, coming in with a brush for the first time on this piece, I think, after using all of those other mark making tools, it is giving me a bolder, thicker line, which is increasing the contrast, and something that I felt like this piece needed at the time. Maybe in hindsight, I might have stopped sooner, though I don't think so. I think I liked it how it is, but a lot of times I get asked, how do you know when something is done? And part of my answer to that is to go past that point. When you have overworked a piece or done it, gone beyond what might have been your favorite part, then you'll know. For future reference, you'll get a feel for what done kind of feels like and looks like to you. And it's okay to go past that point. It's okay to make ugly art or make a mess, and you learn from every bit of that. So give yourself permission, or let me give you permission, even though you don't need my permission, if you think you do, to play and experiment and make a mess. And make discoveries along the way. I love those lines on the right-hand side of the paper at the moment. Remind me of the bracket or shelf mushrooms that I often see on downed logs and trees that are decomposing in the woods when I go for walks, and I find them quite beautiful. So I really enjoy that. So if after making a mess and playing around and trying all these different things, you have a favorite section that you enjoy and you're not really loving the rest, you can always crop it if you want and just save your favorite part. Or several favorite parts for lots of little paintings or bookmarks or postcards. There's lots of things you can do with it. So this one, again, was another one that I had made in that prior video, the first layer, and then waited for it to completely dry. It might have just been used to clean the brayer, and I still wanted to use it now for something else. It was on a piece of old music, sheet music, from a book I got at a thrift store, coming in and being inspired by a single botanical to go bigger with a single bold motif, bigger motif on this one, rather than so many different bits and pieces. So choosing to have that center focal point on this one, and adding a few more colors of ink to this one. I had an old bottle with some brown in it that I needed to use up, and this seemed like a good time to do so, especially since all those winter treasures over there had lots of different shades of brown in them, and I had gone for a walk, and when they were in the sun, that winter golden brown was inspiring me. And then adding some white around it so that I'm going to frame the botanical kind of with the white ink. Adding some water from a spray bottle to help that flow and also thin it out because I want it to be a little translucent so that I can see little bits of the sheet music underneath, but I don't want to be able to see necessarily what the song was or be able to play it. Just want it to give me these little echoes peeking through. And I obviously sped this up a lot more than I did on the first ones, but was still working pretty fast. Not quite as fast as it appears here, but pretty fast. And I think that changes the energy of a still life to put the emphasis more on the life, the liveliness. When you're working faster, you can kind of feel that in the finished piece and in your body while you're painting. So this is a great practice for mind, body, and spirit, all of the above. And I hope that you enjoy it if you decide to make some of your own. And I'd love to see them if you do. I host a group for co-creative artists. You can get a link for that in the description and share anything you create there with us. So this is the last one that I'm going to share, and I mostly used some paint pens to first draw those few shapes. I wanted to do folk art inspiration and then add some color to it, and that particular piece of paper kind of had a very symmetrical underneath. So I started with that, then adding my shapes to kind of create my own coloring page, and then painting those in here. I'll often go back and forth between markers and messier paint so that if I'm out of the studio, I can take the acrylic paint pens or watercolor paint pens, I used acrylic on this one, to doodle like I'm doing here. This time I'm adding the finishing touches, but first I might do a layer to create my shapes. Then I might come back into the studio to add a layer of paint, and then I can take it outside or wherever I am with a bag of paint pens to add these finishing touches like that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can give it a thumbs up if you have, and subscribe for future videos, or join me for one of the art adventures that I host. I hope you have a beautiful and creative day.